Yes, I would.
Oh, no. So would this be fair?
The organization devoted to telling stories of hope and success in food and agriculture systems. I am so excited to be here today with a longtime friend to discuss how farmers can be a huge solution. They are already doing things every day to solve the climate crisis, and hear about more success stories from Milion Belay. Milion is the general coordinator of the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa and a member of the IPUS Food Panel. So, Milion, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
And thank you to the Agri-Food Pavilion for hosting us and having just wonderful conversations, very intense conversations over the last 2 weeks to push food transformation forward. So, Milion, one thing I'd really love your thoughts on is that there's more and more interest in Africa for investment from the agri-food sector. And I'm going to be very honest with you, that concerns me because I think that could end up very badly. Yeah. And so I wonder if you share the same concerns that will focus, that kind of investment will focus on big farms and not the small holders and medium-sized holders who need the most investment.
I do. This is a huge concern for us because big farms they don't build resilience into the system. They don't build the natural resilience, or they don't build social resilience. Big farms actually displace a lot of farmers too. Most of the time, when the size of your farm increases, you have to use technologies and you have to use agricultural inputs. And these agricultural inputs, pesticides, artificial fertilizers, they pollute the soil. The pesticides also, in most of the cases, they kill farmers, they kill life. So in that case, it's very bad. And in most of the cases, how do governments enter into this kind of agreements, What do governments get? And what do we have to change to make it possible for people to invest? Most of the time, our strong laws around seeds, around biosafety regulations, around investment, around fertilizers, all that, they change to accommodate these investments. Therefore, this change affects quite a lot, and it's also a little bit, longer. It has a longer lifespan. Meaning, if you want to change a policy or a law, you have to go through a long process. But you have changed that also to accommodate investment. Most of the investments are also under the banner of a PPP, public-private investment. Even though it brings, money into the country to some extent, some dollars which are needed. But it has its own,
comes with baggage.
Drawbacks. Yeah, it comes with a baggage. It bypasses the parliament most of the time. We don't know what the agreement is. And most of the time, also, they're given a preferential treatment, and they want to go in, invest, and get money and go out most of the time. For that, they don't have a longer-term perspective. They just do things in a short while. So there's so many drawbacks.
And your organization really focuses on food sovereignty. I believe in many cases, many of these governments and many of these public-private partnerships don't even understand what food sovereignty is.
Yeah, I suspect so. Because unlike food security, which doesn't question where the food is coming from,
right.
Food sovereignty asks, where is the food coming from? How is it produced? Is the food culturally appropriate? And it goes beyond and asks also question, who owns the food system in general, the global food system? As you know, very few companies own the majority of our seeds, in the majority of the agricultural inputs. They own land, they are the main actors in the commodity also, buying wheat from somewhere and transporting it and whatever. So it is controlled by few powerful forces, which do see how much they get, not whether people are fed or not whether the agricultural activity was nutritious kind to the land or to the
Right.
people or not. So, yeah.
Well, you bring up an interesting point about, whether we're actually nourishing people. And I think so
Yeah.
much of the investment is unfortunately, still going towards filling people up,
Yeah.
often with empty calories
Yeah,
and commodity
yeah.
crops, and not actually in the foods that nourish
Yeah,
people.
no.
And that's a huge part of food sovereignty, actually nourishing
Yes,
communities.
basically, food sovereignty asks, how is food produced? What kind of food is produced? Are you producing food without impacting the environment? Is the food diverse? Nutrition comes from diversity. You have to eat from diverse food. And diversity is a source of resilience. And diversity is adaptation to the climate crisis that we are having, So it's a very, very, very important thing. But the other systems, most monoculture systems, destroy that. As you've said, one problem with the monoculture system or the industrial agriculture is it focuses on few commodity crops. And what African countries are encouraged to do is to orient their agriculture into market-based agriculture, which actually means producing few commodity crops. And that would impact hugely the nutrition and the diversity of crops that are planted. It's a very critical crisis.
We've talked about resilience in its many forms already, but when we're at a conference like COP, we talk about climate resilience. And while we should focus on reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the food and agriculture sector, what we do need to increase is that social resilience that we talked about. And how, from your perspective, how does that come about? How do we build that social resilience?
I think recognizing the social resilience is already there in Africa. Social resilience is already there. People live together. Their philosophy is living together. So it's what we have to try is not to disrupt that.
Right.
There's so many processes which disrupt this social resilience, social cohesion. There was a study which was done in Zimbabwe after Zimbabwe was attacked by Hurricane Ida, So when they compared, communities who were living in conventional kind of agriculture or industrial agriculture with communities living in agroecological and diverse agriculture, what they found, to their surprise, is communities who are living in diverse land in agroecological are much more together, cohesive. Cohesiveness is very much critical when you are attacked by a climate crisis.
Right.
You can mobilize together, you can help each other, you can also do whatever you want to do together. So that togetherness is critical during the climate crisis.
It's a caring economy.
Yeah, very much, very much. They care for each other.
One thing that I've noticed about this COP and probably last year in Sharm is that there's more and more focus on the practice of regenerative agriculture. And while I love this term and I love what it represents, I feel like we might be missing what is the fundamental part of that, which is agroecology. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that.
Every time I say a problem is when big companies endorse something, then greenwashing is happening to some extent, So I know the founders of the regenerative agriculture movement. They mean very well. They understand agroecology. They understand the political part of it. But now, as we speak, regen agriculture is separated from the political side of it. Agroecology stands on its 3 feet. There is practices, or regenerative practices. There is science, cutting-edge science, but the social movement. Why is the social movement needed? Because of what I say. The system is not right, so we have to struggle to change the system. So that struggle is not built into regenerative agriculture, or if it is built, it's very weak now. So that's the problem. It's very easy to co-opt. I think the word is a very beautiful word, regenerative, you know? It's very much easier to understand than agroecology. What's agroecology, people would ask. When you say regenerate, it speaks something, you know? But unfortunately, maybe because of that, it's very easy to co-opt also. It's hugely co-opted now. It's being used as a greenwashing agenda. So that's where the problem lies.
Yeah, every big corporation here at COP seems to be using the term regenerative agriculture and claiming that they are, you know, instilling those practices. And so we all have to be careful. I think there's a lot of greenwashing in this space, and then ultimately greenwashing. I want to talk more about the three pillars of agroecology because I think they're so important. That social movement is key, of course, and I want to come back to that. But the science of agroecology, I think a lot of people dismiss that, and I'm wondering if you can talk more about this is evidence-based research that farmers are doing every day in fields, and it's not just scientists in lab coats.
Yeah, I think the two science it comes from two sources. One is people science and community science. People have been practicing agriculture for a long time, and they have, you know, the seeds that we have is their discovery. You know, they have provided us a number of seeds now. In Ethiopia, we have more than 100 with variety. Close to that also, sorghum variety, barley variety. You know, there's so many varieties. You go to any part of this globe, you go to community, that diversity. Where did that come from? It has come from the thousands of years of experimentation. Woman experimentation, you know, the kind of spices that we have in the house, the kind of the diversity in the food that we have. Where did it come from? It's from women mainly. I'm not saying that men are not inventive and, or innovative. So there is that science, accumulated science, which is coming from generation to generation, flowing like a river. And there is conventional science done in the university, which is equally important, you know. So the behavioral science of plants, the soil chemistry, you know, the study of the soil, economics, anthropology, all that is very much important. So the question is, how do we work with this both knowledge without one dominating the other? So agroecology gives a space for both. Both forms of language. Yeah, they have to work together for both forms of language. Just to give you a typical example, seeds come from communities, yeah? But we are not romanticizing our seeds, you know, we have to increase productivity and whatever, and there are so many characteristics that can be important. So there are conventional breeders. So what we have done is the participatory breeding exercises where the breeders would come, farmers would come, they would detail the criteria, so the characters, the characters that they want from the particular seed. And they do, and they breed together and they bulk it, you know, enhance productivity. So both of them are important.
That participatory research component is key, but there's not enough investment behind it. How do we shift finance flows to invest in farmer-led research and development?
I had a discussion with breeders quite recently, and they told me that, you know, they will only get funding even from our governments when they breed, and if that breed responds to artificial fertilizer and pesticides and whatever. Mainly to the Green Revolution agenda. It's not to consider other characteristics of the seed, like nutrition, and people make alcohols, you know, there's a particular seed which is good for that. Some seeds are important for when women give birth. Some seeds are important to, you know, when you break your bone, you know, for that. And there's so many characters of seeds, and farmers have preferences. women have preferences, which is related to also their cooking practices. So they have to detail that, but mainly there is no funding for that. That is because there's this idea that we have to reorient our agriculture into business, market-led agriculture. So the focus would be which of the seed will respond to more chemicals. That's the problem. We have to shift that.
And I think, Milion, after talking to people like you for so many years now, that we're overly focused on production, on high yielding crops, and that's a problem with the seed breeding sort of, monopoly that's going on. How do we convince folks that, we have enough food to feed the world right now, and, probably 10 or 11 billion?
Yeah.
What are we doing wrong?
I think we call it a productivist agenda, focus on production. Climate change, okay, let's produce more food. So more food is important, but food has to be nutritious and healthy. And it has to be produced without impacting the environment. It has to be culturally appropriate. There are so many criteria that we want from our food. It's not only the amount that we have on our table. And as you are saying, for example, yesterday we were discussing 40% of the food that we produce is wasted.
Right.
Food waste is huge. If you click that, if you really work on that one, then the amount of food that we have will increase dramatically. And a most important question is, do we agree that we are in a crisis or not? Is obesity, food-related crises are here. We are in a climate environment, and we are in a climate crisis in the 30 to 40% of the greenhouse gas that we get come from the food system. So what kind of food system would respond to that? That's a question. Not industrial agriculture.
Right.
No way. So we have to shift. I think that's the most important thing. And they have to realize that we are in a crisis. That's the most important.
We are in an emergency. We are in a crisis, and it's several crises at once. I've been hearing all week about the poly crisis, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like farmers have been dealing with the poly crisis for their entire lives, for generations and generations. They've always had to deal with the variations in weather, and not having extension services, not having the resources or education that they need. Farmers know how to do this. Why don't we listen to them?
Because they are not educated formally, you see? That's the biggest problem. In so many cases where they say that they are listening to farmers, it's symbolic. They'll bring local communities, like 5 or 6 of them, they put them in a setup that they're not used to, and you have a house full of university-educated experts
People
and
in
whatever.
suits, yeah.
And they will be given probably 10 minutes of a 3-hour meeting. And that's farmer participation for you.
Right.
You have to go into their context, you have to stay with them for a longer time, and you have to listen. And you'll bend on your knee. I have spoken with farmers, and the level of respect that I have, it's not for saying it. I can't tell you. They're so wise. They say no. They know, the elders in the local communities. But everybody talks about listening to farmers. But how is very much important. The setup is very much important. You have to go to where they are and sit with them and listen to them. It's not bringing them into this kind of spaces and, they have very few minutes.
And showing them off.
Yeah, it's just for ticking the boxes,
Yeah.
That's what farmers' participation and youth participation is.
Right.
You'd
And
have
women
3.
participation.
Yeah, you have 3 for youth here. Youth is here. Tick the boxes.
So how do we change this? How do we make sure that youth are decision makers, women are decision makers,
Yeah.
farmers in general are decision makers at these conferences, at every event like this?
We are addressing that as AFSA. Now, at 4 o'clock in this afternoon, we're launching a big summit for youth. 1,000 youth are going to come from 15 African countries to Ethiopia in November next year, and we are going to listen to the youth. And they will come with their own solutions. They will have their own discussions, and we have to listen. And the only way of listening is giving them a space, enough time for them to really digest this agenda. But anyway.
I'd love to hear more about this conference. It's next November?
Yes, next October.
Next October. That's fantastic. And youth from all over sub-Saharan Africa.
Yes. Even from Egypt, and other countries also.
Fantastic.
Tunisia, Morocco, they will come.
And that's a real opportunity to make sure that youth have that space to talk to one another, learn from one another.
Yeah.
I think that's been lost in some of these conversations as well. What youth and women and farmers can learn from one another.
Yeah, to define their agenda. What do they want? Everybody seems to know what youth want. Oh, give them technology. Then they should be fine. That's what everybody says.
When you're talking about an aging farmer population across the globe, everyone thinks that innovation and technology is what's going to keep them on the farm. What will keep them on the farm?
I mean, I went to farms and I had a discussion with youth, and I've asked them, do you want to stay in the farm? They say, no. No. Well, why don't you? Because they look at the youth in urban areas, you know? They don't have the youth, every young person wants an opportunity. So you have to make wherever they are a very, very good place to stay. Farming is not an easy activity. You have to make farming acceptable and easier for them and a very good. That needs investment.
Yeah.
It needs plenty of investment.
Absolutely.
So people are not investing in that, you see. It's more than technology.
It is more than technology. Million, today is Food Day at COP, and many of us who've been working towards this, it feels like a time for celebration, but it also feels like a time like, why did it take this long to have a food day at, one of the most important conferences that happens every year? So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about moving forward. This COP will end in a few days. What do we do now? What do we do now to make sure that sort of every day is Food Day at COP or any conference?
It's a very, very interesting event. On one side, there's a lot of excitement around food. What is signed by, the Emirates Declaration is also a good beginning, But go to the negotiation side. The global stock take, for example, is not featuring.
Right.
Agriculture and food system are not featuring. I had a conversation with the German delegate, the German minister, I think, the agriculture minister, and I've told her that we are shocked that why, while the Emirates Declaration is, and why is it not in the global stock take? And one of the agreements or the negotiations that broke here are the agriculture negotiation. So probably Dubai will not have a very good story to tell, on food systems in the negotiations. I'm just coming from a press conference, We have produced a press statement expressing our disappointment that the governments couldn't agree to go forward on agriculture, on what is very critical for millions of farmers.
Right.
And the global stake not considering food systems in agriculture. It's a shame if they don't include it, honestly.
Yeah, it's more than a shame. It's just a lost opportunity in a million different ways. So to end, Emilion, I wonder what your call to action is for the next COP, because we're probably going to be disappointed by this one, unfortunately. What's your call to action for next year?
One call is the agriculture negotiation has to get resolved, and we need to go to implementation. That's very much important. And at the center of that implementation, we want agroecology to feature. My second call is, I think this GST, the Global Stocktake, is a very, very critical event. It gives a signal to whatever negotiations in the future to come. So it has to include agroecology in food systems.
It has to.
Yeah.
Has to include agroecology. Thank you so much, Milion.
Thank you, Danny.
What a wonderful conversation. Are there any questions from anyone in the audience before we end? Thank you again to the Rockefeller Foundation, EFAD, the CG Consortium. for helping us put together this panel today. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you all will learn a lot from it as well. Thank you, William. Thank you.